Welcome back to another episode of Novelio. Today is Friday, June 25th, 2021. First off, I want to say that I am incredibly sorry that I have not published an episode all week. I have been fighting with all of the technological devices that help me to upload, post, and share episodes all week. I'm not sure if the podcast gods were against me, but it was just not happening, and I lost all of the content that I tried to upload this week. I have missed posting episodes for you guys, and I've so missed chatting with you, and I am so sorry, but I'm back, and so help me, I will not let this happen again. On another note, not to ruin your day, it's 6 months till Christmas today, but let's not think about that. Let's move on and continue reading It Happened on Dufferin Terrace by Melanie Robertson-King. Serenity pushed into her room and removed her outerwear, but kept on the pashmina, the message written in her head from Roger's house to the chateau-frontenac. Now was the time to open her mail program and type it. Dear Mr. Thacker, this isn't a decision I've come to lightly. She hesitated. No matter how many times she went over the termination in her mind, when she placed her fingers on the keyboard, she froze. Please accept this as my letter of resignation. I appreciate everything you've done for me over the years at Thacker, Price & Associates, but in my time in Quebec-City, I've discovered there is more to life than working. No, it isn't the romance of the town. I've not taken leave of my faculties. It's not my biological clock ticking either. I want more than 9 to 5, most nights later, and sometimes 7 days a week. When I return to Toronto, I'll work my notice period. My last day will be on January 26th. Again, she stopped. Did she mention Jonathan's had hunted her at the end of the meetings? No, that was like rubbing salt. Don't try to change my mind, it's made up. She hit the backspace and deleted the last 2 sentences, then typed her name even though her email had a signature. Her finger hovered over the mouse, prepared to click send. Within seconds of her sending it, her iPhone would ring. Courage summoned, she clicked. As predicted, her smartphone chirped, but she ignored the incoming call. Instead, she phoned Jonathan Drake using the room's telephone. She accepted the position, but she wouldn't be able to start until January 29th. Those tasks completed, she moved on to selling her condominium and searched realtors in the GTA. When she found one she thought capable of doing the job for a fair price, she emailed them and added the contact details in her phone. Being December 26th, Boxing Day, the soonest the transaction could begin was Wednesday. Chapter 23. Roger's home, Rue de Rempart, Quebec City. Melissa walked into the living room, carrying a steaming mug of hot chocolate in each hand. The kitchen door swung on its hinges in her wake. Roger sat on the chaise portion of the sectional, aiming the remote control at the television, the image continually changing. He didn't acknowledge her even when she stepped in front of him and placed the piping hot cup on the coffee table. We're a right pair, sitting at home on New Year's Eve, said Melissa. Single father life. I'm used to staying in at night. You can go out if you want. What, and leave you here moping on your own? Not a chance. She sipped her cocoa. Hey, this stuff is yummy. Where from? From La Fagerie in Lower Town. Seated on the opposite end of the couch, she curled her leg underneath the other one. So why aren't you and Serenity doing something tonight? I'm here, so Adam's not alone. She leaned closer to her brother. She's not into holidays. Planned on a quiet night in. If you ask me, she enjoyed herself with us at Christmas. Yes, she did. Then phone her. Melissa raised her voice as she spoke. Tori lifted her head from her bed. Roger turned and glared at her. Oops, sorry, she giggled, then turned serious. If you don't call Serenity, I will. At 10:30 at night? No. Then walk up there and quit being such a misery gut. A knock on the front door, followed by Tori's barking, interrupted the banter. Roger rose from the sectional before the dog barked the house down. "Shush," he commanded. The black lab stopped instantly but hovered next to him. Being on her own for a moment allowed Melissa to take custody of the remote control. She hit the guide button and searched the directory for something to watch. Her brother's choice of programs left much to be desired if he kept it on a single channel long enough. "Someone for you," he said. "Hi, Mel. I missed you." She spun around. "Gareth, what are you doing here?" "I came to see you. Try to make up for being a daft ape." "Well, I can see you two have some catching up to do. Maybe I will go see Serenity." Roger left his sister, and her ex-boyfriend to their own devices and shrugged into his Eddie Bauer parka. He pulled up his plaid headgear on and grabbed his Christmas neckwear from Serenity off the rack. Outside he breathed a sigh of relief. He loved Mel, but the sooner she found a place to live other than with him, the happier he would be. His mother returned to Ottawa the day after Boxing Day. He pushed his hands into his coat pockets and brought out his heavy gloves. At this time of night he couldn't phone Serenity. Calls at this hour tended to mean bad news. Winding his scarf around his neck another time, he started up the street to the chateau-frontenac. About halfway up the road he paused and took out his cell phone. Why not? The worst thing, he'd wake her up, and she'd be furious with him. He phoned the hotel switchboard and asked for her room. When the call went through, her phone rang at least 10 times, but she never answered. Roger continued toward the hotel. The New Year's Eve festivities on Grand Allée would be well underway and only a short walk up Rue Saint-Louis to the wall. The faint strains of music wafted in the night breeze, blown down from the celebrations. As he converged on Dufferin Terrace, he spotted her leaning against the barrier at what she called their spot. Her red buffalo-checked scarf fluttered in the wind. His heart swelled with happiness at seeing her, and he picked up his pace. To surprise her, he turned on to the sidewalk in front of Musée du Fort. From here he could approach her without seeing him. Many people were out tonight, some meandering along the promenade, others like Serenity looking out over the river. La Vie on the opposite shore was well lit. Some bright colors, some regular shades of street lamps made the reflections on the water appear magical. "So this is your idea of a quiet night in?" He encircled her waist with his arms and planted a soft kiss on her cheek. Startled, Serenity jumped. "I didn't expect to see you tonight." "Me either. Maybe a phone call at midnight to wish you a Happy New Year, and that was it." She turned around to face him and placed her hands on his forearms before resting her head on his chest. Pleased Roger had decided to venture out after all. Curious why the sudden reversal in arrangements, she asked. "Gareth turned up on my doorstep. I thought I'd give him and Mel some space." "Extremely thoughtful of you. They do need to talk." When Melissa mentioned their breakup, I saw how devastated she was. I hope they can work things out. "I do too. She's my baby sister, and I want her to be happy." The devotion Roger showed his youngest sibling warmed Serenity's heart. Feelings like that for her brother didn't exist. She didn't care if he was alive, dead, or clean. Now she was with the one person who was important to her. "Let's take in the New Year's festivities up the street," he suggested. "What's going on?" "You'll see." Tease. She slapped him with her sash and took hold of his hand. Many people walked to the city wall. Only after they rounded the curve in the road was the dazzlingly lit Ferris wheel visible. Serenity gasped. "You've not seen anything yet. Grand Allée is shut down to traffic. All the bar and restaurant patios are open." "Really? Seems a wrong time of year for outdoor terraces." "They have heaters." The closer they got to the old city's rampart, the more people crowded the pavement. At times they had to walk on the asphalt to get around the masses. Fragrant aromas wafted out the doors of the restaurants lining the street whenever a door opened. Tantalizing her taste buds, music blared from exterior speakers. Before they reached the gate, the din became overpowering. Serenity clutched Roger tighter. In this large crowd, getting separated was conceivable. As if he understood her apprehension, he drew her close to him. When he did, she put her arm around his waist. Together they were inseparable. "Do you want to go on the Ferris wheel?" Serenity shook her head. She never went on a midway ride in her life. This one petrified her. The enormous ring was stopped to let passengers off and others ones on. The idea of being in the seat at the top when stationary scared her to death. Its height was dizzying. What if a bolt fell out and the gondola crashed to the ground? By the time they squeezed their way up the street to the National Assembly, midnight had almost arrived. Roger stopped them there. Serenity didn't question him. Quebec was his city, and he knew what he was doing. Standing in front of Place Georges V, they turned facing the building under restoration just as the countdown to 2018 began. Soon the fireworks started. Flashes of blazingly colored light exploded in the sky, accompanied by loud bangs and pops. The starbursts continued into the night. Roger turned her to face him. He placed his hands on her cheeks and whispered in her ear, "I love you, Serenity Lane." Those were the words she longed to hear from him. When the Jonathan's contract began, entering a relationship wasn't part of the bargain, but she had, and better still, he loved her. "I love you too, Roger Scott." Tears moistened her eyes. He brushed his lips against hers. Serenity put her arms around his waist and pulled him close, all the while returning his kiss. Oblivious to the crowd surrounding them, the only fireworks she was aware of were those in her heart. The only other person there with her was him. Epilogue. Gare du Palais, Quebec City. On the morning of January 6th, Roger, Adam, and Tori accompanied Serenity to Gare du Palais. The day dawned dull and gloomy and matched her mood. They walked into the station with her as far as possible with the dog. The oily tang of diesel fumes from idling engines hung in the air and caught in the back of her throat. "Don't go," said Adam. Tears filled the little boy's eyes. "I don't want you to leave." She squatted in front of him. "I have to go, but I'll be back at the end of the month, I promise." He wrapped her in an embrace and buried his face in her collar. She returned his hug. His emotions brought hers to the surface. When she stood, salty tears blurred her vision. Roger's eyes were moist, too. At this point, she didn't want to board the train. She longed to stay with them, but she promised to come back and work her notice period. She always kept her word. Roger held her tight, bent down and kissed her. When their lips touched, she put her arms around his neck. A shrill whistle and the "all aboard" command separated them. Serenity snatched up her bags and ran to the coach, where the conductor lifted her luggage for her. She turned around and waved to Roger and Adam. After boarding, she wrestled her large case into the rack near the doors and took her computer bag with her. With Wi-Fi available, she could continue with work on the journey home. Serenity slumped into a seat. Her mind wasn't on work. She opened her MacBook and started a property search for a place to live in Quebec City instead. She had listed her home right after Boxing Day and had some nibbles. If she wanted to be Jonathan Drake's neighbor, there was an apartment in the stone building next door to him. No way. That was too close for comfort. A few of the properties spoke to her, and she noted the realtor's site and address. Some were mere blocks away from Roger. They would be near enough to see each other, yet have their own space. Exposed beams and stonework walls were high on her must-haves. "What do you mean you're leaving the firm?" Martin Thacker spluttered and tossed a file folder on her desk. The papers within spilled out over it. Serenity stood. "I believe I made my intentions clear in my letter of resignation. But the job you did on the Jonathan's contract." She couldn't tell him she would complete the remainder of the assignment as an employee of the company which contracted the agency. "I'm sorry, my mind is made up. You won't change it." She swept around the desk and held the door open. "Now, if it's all right with you, I have work to do." The man left, muttering and shaking his head. These next 3 weeks were going to be a living hell. Sever all ties with Thacker Price and Associates right away? Cut and run and not put in her notice period? January 26th would not come soon enough. Powerless to concentrate, she called her realtor. She had booked a showing for that afternoon, but they should be out by the time Serenity got home from work. At least something was going right. She composed an email to Roger and asked him to look at a house a couple of blocks from him. Number 8, Rue Saint-Famille. Thanks. Close with 2 X's for kisses. 2 forward? In the end, she typed them. Not that it was a concern. Parking was an issue in the old part of Quebec City. She didn't have a car. In Toronto, she never needed one. The public transit system was more than adequate. In time, she'd learn the routes and schedules in her new hometown, too. The rest of the day dragged on. Serenity was delighted when 5 o'clock came. For the duration of her employment with Thacker Price and Associates, she planned on leaving on time every night, not working from home and not going in much ahead of her scheduled start time. She packed up her MacBook Air and some of her other personal things. Rather than take them all on her last day, removing a few each night was far more natural. Serenity paced from her office to the elevator. The car arrived before her boss had a chance to speak with. No scream at her over her decision. Exiting the building, she breathed in the city air. Even with the pollution, Toronto smelled better in the cold weather. It was like the snow muffled the pungencies. Sadly, the subway didn't. The odors of food and sweat permeated the carriage. As always, Serenity ended up standing with her nose in someone's stinky armpit. The return to street-level welcoming. Serenity turned the key in the deadbolt. A sliver of light glowed beneath the door. The realtor must have forgotten to turn off one of the fixtures, or she was still showing the property and extolling the virtues of residing in this trendy borough. She pulled a rolling computer bag into the foyer behind her into the empty room. No one was in the kitchen either. Still, someone was inside. Boots removed and slippers on, she moved slowly around the living room. Before going any further, she grabbed an overweight sculpture off the coffee table. If someone were in her home, they'd regret it. On tiptoes, she crept down the corridor towards the bathroom. The clear glass shower doors prevented anyone from hiding there. A shuffling sound came from her bedroom. She took a deep breath and flung the door open. Her tatty panda bear wasn't in its customary place in the chair. A man stood in front of the dresser with his back to her. "Don't move! I've called the police." The threat was empty. She hadn't dialed 911, but the intruder didn't know any different. He turned around and faced her. "My God, Eric, what are you doing here?"